Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I want to thank Aaron and the Seattle Metals Guild and all of you for showing up tonight. It's pretty exciting to be here. I am a metalsmith. I'm an artist. It's been my lifelong dream to be an artist. So I'm going to take you back in the past a little bit. So as I said, being an artist is my profession, but it's more than that. It's been my lifelong dream. And tonight I'm here to talk about the art of play as it relates to my work. So humor me as I go back in time a bit. Since the day my neighbor and playmate Jan Bennett taught me how to transform my hand into a turkey, I've always known that I wanted to be an artist. But I grew up in the middle of nowhere on a gravel road in Cache, Arkansas, and that idea seemed pretty far-fetched. So in hindsight, actually it was a great place to grow up as an artist because I was surrounded by some pretty colorful characters. This is a photo of my great aunt Floy being baptized in the Cache River on my family farm. So I descend from a long line of Bible-thumping Christians, inventors, and good old boys. My childhood was probably more hillbilly than I can ever relate to you, but it was pretty brilliant as well. My great-grandpa Charlie built this cypress shack in the early 1900s. My grandparents Briscoe and Ruth spent the first months of their married lives in a tiny smokehouse outbuilding on this property. It was about 100 square feet with little ventilation, one entrance, and no window. Well, of course, they had to get out of there, so they cleared 400 acres of wooded land just a stone's throw away from Grandpa Charlie's. They used horses, mules, a little ingenuity, and a whole lot of dynamite. So they built their own house. They planted cotton, soybeans, rice, and they raised 10 kids. The blonde kid on the right is my Aunt Janet, their youngest. Eventually, I was born, of course. My grandparents have 246 blood relatives that have descended from their union. But despite this bounty of relatives, aunts, uncles, and cousins, I'm an only child, and I spent hours playing alone outside in this landscape. My imagination was vivid. I invented games and toys while I swam, climbed trees, caught lightning bugs, and tadpoles. I fished with my grandpa. I spent hours imagining what else existed in the world other than on this farm. What else was out there away from the water moccasins, the dirt roads, the frog-legged dinners, and the chickens. Then the carnival came to town. So let me tell you, it was thrilling to this girl, okay? So I believe the carnival had finally brought the world to me. I discovered that it is a crazy world with a mixed up bag of tricks. Through the carnival, I was blown away, and every year I couldn't wait for it to come back. So I was attracted, frightened, wowed by the rides that were brilliant designs, towers of terror. I'd never seen so many toys. I played games like crazy, and of course, I marveled at the carnies. Who in the world were these exotic people? Where did they come from? And yes, thank you, ma'am, I would love to pet that albino boa constrictor for $1. And of course, I would love to spend my money, my mother's hard-earned $25 playing a game while trying to win a toy that was worth only $3. If there was a heaven, I was in it. I ran around like a chicken with my head cut off from one spectacle to the next. I rode every ride, played every game, and tried to win every quarter in that magical, mystical quarter machine. And today, as an informed, educated adult, of course, I'm a little jaded, but as you will see, the carnival has made quite an impression on my art. It's one of the primary reasons that I make the art that I make today. But I didn't run away with the carnival. I ran away instead to Texas, and I went to Dallas first, and then I landed in Lubbock in the Panhandle. I enrolled in art school at Texas Tech University, and finally I tried to pursue my notion that I was an artist, and I commenced to making something that didn't involve outlining my hand first. School became my playground. I painted, sculpted, blew glass, and identified every art slide put in front of me. Fortunately, Rob Glover, who some of you may know, was my metalsmithing professor. He recognized that I was determined and focused and full of drive, and I was eager to prove his theory. So one glorious day, he took me out to lunch and signed me up as a metals major. In the dictionary under best teacher ever, you're going to find Rob's picture there. He called me his Tasmanian devil, but most importantly, Rob taught me how to become an impeccable craftsman. The metalsmithing process hypnotized me, and it still does. I quickly learned how to transform a two-dimensional sheet of metal into something with 3 dimensions. I was hooked. Rob is an artist as well as a professor, and he's well known for his exquisitely designed and crafted teapots. So, as his student, I made teapots. This is Arshil, the last teapot that I made the year I graduated with my BFA from Texas Tech. Arshil took top honors in the National Student Sterling Design Competition and traveled to 6 museums nationwide. I continued on in grad school at UW. I was determined to make something that broke the traditional boundaries of metalsmithing at the University of Washington. I wanted desperately to move people in a different way. Again, I found incredible teachers at UW: John Marshall, Mary Hu, Roger Horner, Akio Takamori, Sean Brixey, Paul Berger. Of course, there was a lot of pain and suffering in those 2 years of grad school. Nothing seemed very playful. It seems funny to say that now, but believe me, it's no joke. I had the most brutal critique of my career handed to me by John Marshall. It was the beginning of my second year, and I forged some large-scale copper pieces. They were pretty atrocious. I proceeded to paint them in primary and secondary colors, didn't really know what I was doing. I put magnets inside them and hung them from the ceiling. During our metals crit, John asked me this question. He said, I'm not sure if you just don't know anything about color or... So I was devastated. He went on, even after that, he went on to tell me that if I would have applied to grad school with those pieces, then I would not be there now. So I freaked out. It was a serious wake-up call, and I was devastated again, but I did wake up. I stopped coasting. I did some research. I consulted my grad committee. I brainstormed. I freaked out. I knuckled down. For my thesis exhibition at the Henry Art Gallery, I made my first 3-dimensional zoetrope out of sterling silver, copper, steel, motors, strobe lights, and music. Its title, Carnival of Life, is a reference to a toy, a child's toy that was marketed in the 1860s by Milton Bradley. It's called The Wheel of Life. And here it is. All right. That year, after I made Carnival of Life and graduated, I'm like, what am I going to do now? Luckily, I received the Betty Bowen Award the same year I graduated from UW, administered by the Seattle Art Museum. And I think it was due in large part because Vicki Halper, who was the curator one of the curators at the Seattle Art Museum, had seen my piece at the Henry. And you kind of do have to see these pieces in person to understand what's going on. And there we go. So that year, I also signed with a gallery in Seattle, Meyerson Nowinski, and I started making more zoetropes. Carnival of Life traveled to 5 different museums within 3 years. This is a close-up of another zoetrope I made called Musical Sideshow. It was exhibited along with Carnival of Life at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco. The base of the piece is a child's record cabinet from the 50s. Another zoetrope, Get Me Off This Crazy Thing, which was shown at the Susquehanna Art Museum and the Milton Hershey Museum, and then back to Seattle for Bumbershoot. With this piece, I started to incorporate 10 toys. As a grad student, I had stumbled upon this great toy shop in Pikes Market called The Great Windup. I don't know if any of you guys have been there, but I recommend that you check it out. Very cool spot. So The Great Windup carries reproductions of wind-up toys from the 50s, and I just love their nostalgic retro design. They fit into my idea that somehow the future, which was imagined after World War II, has turned into something quite different. That world where happy little robots named Rosie make you breakfast and we all zip around with jetpacks on our back hasn't really been realized, I don't think. So the owner of The Great Windup and I became great friends. He began to save all of his broken toys for me because the manufacturers in China would reimburse him for his broken toys, but didn't want him to ship them back because it was more expensive. It was cheaper to throw them away. And then in 2003, a fellow artist, Seth Sexton, and I started a collaboration. When we first met, we each brought toys to the coffee shop. We began to haunt thrift stores together, and we found shelves and shelves of donated toys. He and I worked together for 3 years while continuing to pursue our own work. Seth is an amazing painter, and we played well together. This is a video still from Remains, where we filmed ourselves with 2 different cameras amongst a background of stuffing from gutted plush animals, which we had taken scissors to, 8 activated toys over a 30-minute period. All of these toys had a mechanical component, and we cut them to shreds while they were turned on. So we eviscerated each until we revealed what was underneath. Sometimes it was great, sometimes it wasn't so great, but as a result of that collaboration, I found new inspiration. Which brings me to this. It's really strange where you find inspiration. I took this photo at Coney Island a few years ago. So whether I'm alone in my studio or collaborating with someone else or at a carnival, I'm inspired by play. According to play theorist Brian Sutton Smith, the opposite of play is not work, it is depression, and I believe in that. Today I find myself delving even further into the world's abundance of mass-produced discarded stuffed toys. I mean, really, does the world need another gigantic stuffed horse? Isn't it just going to end up here? I've concluded the obvious. We humans are a wasteful, consumptive lot. Most people believe that what's here today can easily be thrown away tomorrow. According to the International Council of Toy Industries, worldwide toy sales in 2010 totaled $83.3 billion. The U.S. market is the largest, of course, with sales of nearly $22 billion. And that's just the toys that were made, right? Or the toys that were sold. That doesn't count for all the ones that were made. The ICTI motto states that they promote international toy safety standards and a responsible attitude to advertising and marketing to children. $83.3 billion in sales. That marketing seems more than a little excessive. This was one of my first toys. So don't get me wrong, I love toys. You've probably picked that up by now. I'm obsessed by them. Zip was one of my first, as I said. He had a squeaker in his left hand. I don't know if you can see that, but I quickly tore his hand apart and tried to figure out what was in there. So, but I've kept him. So we all play with toys to form and strengthen social bonds. As a child, I made my own, as I said. Historically, humans have for centuries. We use toys to teach and to remember, and we use them to reinforce lessons taught to us when we were young. We use them to discover our identity and to form our opinions about the world. That said, I think something's gone horribly wrong. And just when I thought there was no hope for humanity, I found this little guy. I stripped the stuffing off him and discovered a hidden beauty. What an amazing design. As a metalsmith, to me, my next step was obvious. I recreated him out of metal. A metal that is valued worldwide as one of the most precious, sterling silver. So this is Trumpet. Now, would you throw this guy away? Trumpet is the first sculpture I made from a discarded toy. So clearly I found another way to play with toys. Modern findings in neuroscience suggest that play promises and promotes flexibility of mind. Play utilizes adaptive practices such as discovering multiple ways to achieve a desired result. Or creative ways to improve or reorganize a given situation. Since 2007, I've reinvented so many discarded motor-driven animals which had beautifully designed carcasses underneath their stuffing. Then I put them all back together using the original mechanics that were in the original toy. This is some pig, my some pig in sterling silver. So again, discarded, mass-produced rejects, right? I strip them, disassemble them, recast the limbs and armatures in sterling silver or bronze. Then I place them on pedestals for the world to reevaluate. That toy that was forgotten and tossed aside has been reincarnated, and I think better than ever. So this is Silly Rabbit in bronze on the left and in sterling on the right. So all of my objects which were once in the toy chest are now part of history as I have reinvented it. They're historical, they're sculptural, they're archaeological. My horse Buck on the left, and an ancient Greek child's toy from 950 to 900 BCE on the right. This is a child's toy from the Indus Valley civilization, which is modern-day Pakistan, from 2600 BCE on the left, and my good friend on the right. And yes, they work. Once I reinstall their battery-operated mechanisms, their hollow voices and awkward movements are very different from what they were before. They're aged and they're wise. Hippopotamus and Basset, both in sterling. 14 of my bronzes at Moss in Art Miami. So in 2007, I combined my animal bots and my zoetropes into one installation. I created my own 3-ring circus. It features an installation of 3 zoetropes, complete with ear-flapping, trunk-waving elephants, rearing horses, and wide-mouthed hippos. Each animal circles a stainless steel and aluminum Ferris wheel, a glass and steel carnival, a sterling silver merry-go-round, while the characters march in time to eerie circus music, of course. It's titled Carnival of the Animals. The song itself was written by French Romantic composer Camille Saint-Saëns. And here it is. Another video, yeah. Another thing that I learned when I was in grad school at UW is how to take your own photos, shoot your own video, be self-sufficient. So all of my videos were shot by me and edited by me as well. It's a good way to save money. Let's see. So last winter I was awarded a residency in New York City, a place called Traffic, which is on the Upper East Side. For a month I worked at Traffic Art Space in a storefront in full view of people passing by. The public was encouraged to come in and talk to me as I worked. There was a sign in the window that said the workshop is open. I definitely channeled Geppetto during that month. Another one of the driving forces behind my creative process is curiosity. So the title of the show was Curiosities. After all, curiosity forced me to wield scissors and massacre toys, so it seemed appropriate. Curiosities became my studio. So this is my studio in Seattle. When I left for New York, I was in the middle of preparing for the show that's at the Bellevue Arts Museum right now, which was to open in the spring of 2011. So I took what work I could with me. So I shipped tools, stuffing, metal, and of course discarded toys to New York. Every morning I got up, I walked downstairs, and I went to work in my temporary studio. And I kept sweatshop hours. I worked 14 hours a day. I was always there. There was more than a little confusion amongst the Upper East Siders, I can tell you. I think they thought a high-end toy store had moved in. People would walk in and ask me if I was the salesman or, and then someone would come out front and talk to them. But I was very productive. Within a month, I made 70 pieces. From Seattle came all the stuffed skins, which I had already stripped from plush toys. I started to make sculpture based on my desire to use every part of the animal and to waste nothing. So this is a piece that's 8 feet by 8 feet. I sewed stuffing and mechanisms onto a stretched canvas. This wall-mounted assemblage can be activated to sing songs, to make sounds, and to tell stories by pressing on hands, mouths, feet, and bellies. And I had a lot of eyeballs, so I started to make sterling silver eyeball rings. And jewelry's never been something that I've made as a metalsmith. I probably made a few rings and a necklace or two when I was in undergrad at Texas Tech. Nothing when I was at UW. A few things here or there, but I'm enjoying it. I've got a lot of eyeballs, as I said. So what are you going to do with them? Throw them away? Of course not. So there are a few more. Then one happy day in my Curiosity studio, I stripped a Hokey Pokey Elmo. And this design, I feel, deserved to be recreated in sterling silver. So this is my Hokey. Chicken Dance Elmo received the same treatment. This is my chicken. Neither Hokey nor chicken move. I've left the mechanisms out of these two pieces. Some of the pieces that I've done in the last year, I've left the mechanisms out because for me they become purely sculptural. I love the form. And I also stripped Spider-Man. The day I uncovered this hidden little beauty, I was shocked. It was never intended to be seen, yet the color combinations were incredible. Who was making these choices and why were they covering them up? This was Pluto in another life. I never thought I would say this, but I like plastic. And maybe I'm finally learning something about color. At least I know enough not to burn these colors out or throw them away. So I've uncovered so many of these incredible plastic combinations by just stripping the stuffing off. So basically what I'm doing now is I sign the foot and I place them on shelves and I sell them back to the public. So let's watch another little video. It's short. So when I think of the evolution of toys, it's pretty incredible what's happened in the last 100 years. By the 19th century, there were dolls that could say mama. Today, there are computerized toys that can recognize and identify objects. They recognize the voice of their owner. They can choose among hundreds of pre-programmed phrases with which to respond. The materials that toys are made of have changed. What defines a toy has changed. But the fact that children and adults play with toys hasn't changed. Caleb Chung, who is the inventor of Furby and Pleo, defines himself as a toy designer, but he was once a metalsmith. He believes that if we continue along our current path, then we're designing our children's best friends. So there's a lot of social responsibility in that, especially if that toy ends up in the landfill. So for my show, Midway at BAM, I took some of what I discovered during my residency at Traffic and incorporated that into what I was building in my Seattle studio. Midway evolved over 3 years. I was working on other shows while working on the show at BAM. Various pieces on my carousel and Ferris wheel had to be cast, fabricated, sanded, polished, drilled, patinaed, engineered, sewn, hammered, filed, assembled, and disassembled, and finally reassembled at the museum. So I'm sure many of you in the audience as metalsmiths know this. Your process is long and involved. When I work, I'm always thinking and learning. I'm discovering new ways to go, but I make mistakes and I have epiphanies. Since it's all very labor intensive, I try to work in a production mode. So there are all of my bodies of elephants lying on the bench. But I actually like to be in the studio because it helps me focus. I like to be there alone, which doesn't really describe this slide that well. But it helps me to set up a nod of appreciation for the assistants that have helped me along the way. My work has gradually increased in scale over the past 10 years. So each of the skills of people who have assisted me, this is my brother-in-law, Nicholas, who helped me with Midway. So he's a great woodworker. Engineering, metalworking, woodworking, fiber artist. All these people have helped me to realize large projects and installations. I couldn't have done it without them. And surprisingly, sometimes I do like a little company in the studio in my playpen, especially from like-minded creative people. So of course, once Midway was installed, I started thinking about what to make next, right? What are you going to do next? So for some time, I've wanted to design a zoetrope large enough for people to ride. A Midway ride with stationary cars and animals, fixed in different positions of movement, all contained within a strobe-lit atmosphere. So I'm looking for a working carousel or Ferris wheel, if anyone knows of one out there, that I can reinvent. So I wonder if you get on this large-scale Ferris wheel, if you can see the illusion on the other side, or if you're just going to want to throw up. I'll never know until it's completed. So what I do know is that I'll always be seduced by the limitless potential of metal. And right now, that unseen plastic object that's underneath discarded, unstuffed mechanical rejects continues to propel my imagination. Right now, I'm investigating how to create Hokie and chicken at human scale. So my Midway is on display at BAM until January 22nd. This Ferris wheel and carousel are there, and they each stand at about 9 feet tall. Finally and ultimately, this is what I hope you get from my work. I hope it conjures inside you dreamy, carnivalesque, playful operations which allude to our modern world of escapism and frenzy and consumption. But I also want to lure each of you into a magical, playful state where visual magic can linger. And I want you to balance between childhood and adulthood, seriousness and play, and I hope you start to look at toys with a newfound respect. So that's it. Thank you.